It's a really tough and sticky issue right now.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
Good Friday evening to you. Great to have you in. On Fridays, we kind of spread it out a little bit and talk in depth about usually a single issue, because we tape the programs on Thursday evening, actually Thursday afternoon, as part of a double taping each week. And it's just been a horrendous week in America. It just has. Hopefully nothing has happened from yesterday afternoon until tonight's showing of the broadcast here at 7:30 on MyRI TV and Fox Providence at midnight. The coalition against gun violence here in Rhode Island is active all the time, but obviously a go-to organization when we've suffered the kind of American trauma that we did in El Paso and in Dayton. You know, just anecdotally, I went to the University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio. The Oregon district where the shooting occurred at the bar there is a place that I have been to on, an area I've been to on many occasions. On my radio program earlier this week, I brought my old college roommate on, who still lives in the region. His nephew was a pal of the shooter. And I say that not in any kind of, this is not name dropping or starstruck conversation or anything like that. It's just weird. He's on the phone with me saying, yeah, so my nephew is friendly with a guy that's now a mass murderer. The computation on this stuff is almost impossible. The human condition is completely knocked back by this. It's just, and I think the trauma of it on all sides of the aisle affects the way we go about this. I mean, we just have to be able to give each other some space, I think, and listen to each other on each side, so that constructive points can be made and heard. And I just don't think we have a lot of that going on, right? So Linda Finn is the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence. She is here, and I am open, willing, able, wanting of anybody who wants to speak formally on, if there can be described as another side of this conversation, and to have folks in together so we can talk about this as, considered adults. So having said that, that is the premise. I think we all know what we're talking about here. Headlines like this have permeated our conscience over the course of the week. And here's a small version of the summary of the president's trip to El Paso and Dayton.
President Trump spent Wednesday as comforter-in-chief.
We met with also the doctors, the nurses, the medical staff. They have done an incredible job.
He made back-to-back visits to hospitals in Dayton, Ohio and El Paso, Texas, cities still reeling from mass shootings this past weekend.
I wanted to come and thank you.
Reaction to the president's visit was mixed.
It's been in his rallies that he has painted us as an unsafe city.
Both sides are using some strong rhetoric. I believe both sides need to get together and actually have a conversation.
Democratic leaders from both cities want action on gun control.
Do I think that we're going to see another mass shooting tomorrow or Friday? Probably, because Washington will not move.
Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown said he asked President Trump to call on Senate Republicans to take action on guns.
Nan Whaley is the mayor of Dayton, UD grad, but she didn't need to be saying that. I mean, that's tomorrow or Friday. I'm hoping she missed her prediction, right? Her emotion, though, I think needs to be factored in just in terms of the trauma. Just because you're elected doesn't mean that you're not traumatized over this entire thing.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Welcome. Nice to have you back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Big picture perspective, before we get into the Rhode Island stuff, your take on the week is what?
Well, it's scary, like you were saying. I mean, it hits home. You went to University of Dayton. This situation, I have two nephews that are Mexican American. My godson's Mexican American. I mean, he was born in Texas, you know, and to see that somebody literally got in a car and drove to mow down people that look like him is really terrifying to me, and scary. And you know, in our family, we just have a lot of children that have been adopted or born into from, you know, South America. So they're our family, and it's starting to get closer and closer to many people, and it's just happening more frequently as well.
So this guy who did it in El Paso had his own little manifesto that he wrote. I read it and just, I mean, his grammar wasn't perfect, but it was certainly B+. His thinking was connected.
Right.
It was not something that when you look at it, you go, oh, brother.
Right.
It was one of these reads where, okay, where are we going here? Where are we going here? What? You know, one of those kinds of situations. And, you know, I would never quote it here. I don't feel like that's constructive. And I'm not ready necessarily to pin this directly, you know, do not pass go, do not collect $200, pin it right on President Trump, right? But clearly he has an ideology. The guy in Dayton, at press time here, they're still trying to figure out what was going on. You know, family thing, ongoing problems. So I don't know where we go with this conversation. Is it you want to talk about the weapons? You want to talk about the weapons, and you want to talk about prohibition on the weapons and minimizing the weapons and safeguards on the weapons. And I think you have a point of view, so let's hear it.
Well, I mean, we're the only developed country. Every country has, you know, they all have video games. They all have mental illness. They all have family situations that are difficult. You know what I mean? They all have people of color that live in those countries that are minorities. I mean, we're the only country that has these shootings. We have this culture of it happening, and the thing that we have that's different than the other countries is that we have the access to these weapons. And any 18-year-old can right now walk in and they can buy a 50 caliber weapon that can shoot down helicopters. I mean, we can do that in Rhode Island. And it's unconscionable that our
Linda
lawmakers...
brought this photo. It's actually a big poster board, and our director Eric just took a picture of it before we started. You're telling me that this thing is available retail?
Retail.
And it can literally shoot a mile's length?
Yep, accurately. It's a sniper rifle, can shoot a mile.
And it has 5 clips, so it's you know, not AR-15 fast, but it's, yeah. That goes for what, about $8,000, you said?
Yeah. Right. New, I think you can get a used one for about $4,000.
You know, I will have, I'm sure, members of the NRA and/or gun owners will come here and say, "Come on, man, the reason why you buy that gun is for X or Y." I don't know. Maybe it's long-range hunting.
They're not used for hunting.
No, I don't know. See, I'm not big on this stuff, so I don't know.
It's a military weapon, and it really should not be available to be sold to civilians. And it's
Do
more.
we know how many of them are sold?
Well, we don't keep track of how many guns are sold. You know, Rhode Island doesn't keep track of who buys guns or how many guns get sold. I mean, the only
Do we
thing.
have a national number?
No, there's no. You know, years ago, the NRA passed federal legislation that we can't keep records of. It's illegal to actually keep records of gun sales. So, you know, we can go by industry numbers of, you know, what they say has been sold, but they're not verifiable because they don't release the data on it. So we really don't know. We really honestly don't know.
You know, my opening remarks were you know, about just listening. We have to listen to each other.
We do.
You have to listen to the quote other side too.
Yep.
Is there something that the other side has said? By the way, I don't think there's just one other side. There are a lot of people who have, you know, fluid thoughts about this. But is there something that they've said recently where you say, yeah, okay, I'll give them that point? Can you remember
Well,
some
I think
kind of
one
concession?
of the things that they say a lot to me personally and to, you know, members of our group is that, you know, well, you want to take away all our guns, which isn't true. And so I think that that's something that I don't know how we refute that except to
So when you meet somebody for the first time and they say, oh, yeah, you're that lady who wants to take away all the guns, your bumper sticker soundbite response is what?
Well, I say I support the Second Amendment just like everybody else does. I mean, the Second Amendment doesn't give you a right to an assault rifle. I mean, that's been tested in the courts. Justice Scalia has said that. We don't have a right to those weapons. We do have a right to have a handgun in your home and protect yourself, and you can buy, and we have a right to shotguns, but we don't have a right to these military-style weapons. And so, and the high-capacity magazines, which make them even more dangerous. I mean, that's really the thing that makes them dangerous, is the ammunition that you use. The shooter in, I can't even remember which one, but one of them used armor-piercing bullets. It goes through the police-grade bulletproof vests. You know, how is that available for sale in this country? You know, we don't sell it in Rhode Island. Fortunately, that is prohibited, but you can go to other states and buy it. So.
So the answer to the question, I know it's kind of a hypothetical, is that you couldn't come up with anything. That an argument made by, for lack of a better term, a pro-gun person. You haven't conceded any concept or space or.
I've tried to. I mean, it's interesting that the weapon that I brought the picture of. I mean, I was at a gathering of individuals, and there was a guy there that, you know, kept, you know, refuting everything I was saying and talking. And, you know, long story short, PJ Fox, who's from the Institute for Peace that does nonviolence training, was there, and we had a decent conversation with 30 other people in the room. And, you know, by the end of it, he was saying, "Can I carry your gun out to your car for you, ma'am?" And, you know, we had a good back and forth, and I think he realized that I wasn't extreme as he thought I was, and I realized he wasn't as extreme as I thought. So, I mean, I think it's a conversation. I don't think it's just a soundbite and one word, you know.
That's fair. The governor kind of jumped at the General Assembly on this week. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us.
I just keep wondering how many shootings have to happen before we can get together, take action, and ban these military-style weapons. You know, I bet you, this is a horrible thing to say, I bet, God forbid, if there were a shooting of that kind in Rhode Island, finally the General Assembly would do the right thing. Why do we have to wait for that?
That's a tough hypothetical, but I do get the governor's point on that one. The Speaker of the House and the Senate President responded to the governor by saying, Rhode Island's gun control laws are among the strongest in the country. Over the past 2 sessions, the General Assembly has passed several laws that have made it even more difficult for those that pose a danger to the community to obtain firearms. In 2017, a law to take away guns from domestic abusers was passed. In 2018, Rhode Island was one of the first states to pass a red flag bill. We'll talk about that in a minute. Additionally, Rhode Island was amongst the first states to ban bump stocks, which are devices that turn guns into automatic weapons. This past session, the General Assembly passed a law which establishes threat assessment teams in every school in Rhode Island, and it goes on and on and on. They haven't done nothing.
No, they haven't done nothing, but it's been 8 years, and we've got 2 significant pieces of legislation. And you know, the domestic violence bill, fortunately, is a very good piece of legislation, and Rhode Island has some of the strongest domestic violence laws in the country. But it is already a federal law. We were really just trying to match it up with the federal law. We have background checks. We have background checks, which we've had, which are a very big factor in why we have lower, you know, some of the better rates, because that is a really important thing. So you got to give the General Assembly credit for that. That was it matches before I got involved. Yeah, it matches the kind of standard that the term universal background check nationally performs, correct? Absolutely. So, yeah, and we have a 7-day waiting period, which is also another very good law for people. You know, if people can just go into a store and buy a gun immediately, if they're suicidal or homicidal and they haven't had time to calm down, it's a really dangerous situation. So the 7-day waiting period is also a very good law that we have on the books. But you know, if you look at Massachusetts, they've banned these weapons since 1994, and the magazines as well. They also have gun permits. Like, you have to go and apply for a gun permit and get approval by your chief of police before you can buy a gun. I mean, you can't just walk into a store and buy one. You have to have a permit that's been vetted before you can buy one. And then once you have that permit and you try to sell your gun to your uncle, you have to register that you've made that sale. So they keep track of the weapons in a way that they know where they are and who has them, which we don't do in Rhode Island. Well, it is kind of interesting. I hate to be a broken record, but there just seems to be
I would never suggest that the Commonwealth is perfect.
Right.
But it just seems to be that there's so much Massachusetts law that we just have to copy and paste.
Right.
Right?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I think, and you know, and after Sandy Hook, the Governor Chafee at the time put together a commission, and they basically really nothing came out of it. I mean, they established a commission to look at mental health illnesses, and how do we adjudicate if somebody has mental health, but really essentially nothing came out of it. Connecticut passed a assault weapon ban, New York passed a very strict ban, and other states as well, and we really missed that opportunity, I think, back then as well.
Are we waiting for just a federal move on this to kind of take the political heat off?
We can't wait for that, because the way the Senate is made up, and there's so many rural districts that make up the Senate, that it's really hard to imagine that we're going to see anything come out of the Senate the way it's structured right now. And
You're talking about the U.S. Senate?
U.S. Senate, yeah. I mean, that's why we're doing the work we're doing, because we feel as though it really isn't going to happen at a Senate level.
A lot of this conversation has caused, though, some of our rural communities to really act out in a way that is provocative. It started in Burrillville and went right down the northwest side of the state, where everyone was just kind of like, trying to claim some kind of sanctuary status for weapons in their communities. Their police departments are saying, "Whoa, we're not breaking any laws here," but they are not going to allocate money for confiscation of weapons and those kinds of things. I mean, we see the same kind of divide that America has right here in Rhode Island.
Right, we do, and I think, and part of that, there's a misconception there that the bills that were introduced this year would confiscate weapons. And, if we do pass an assault weapon ban, if it does get passed in Rhode Island, there's nothing in that bill that says they're going to confiscate existing weapons. People would be grandfathered with the weapons they have. So, and in the reality, even with these extreme risk protection order or the red flag bill, your weapons, if you come before the judge and he deems that weapons need to be taken away, it's just for 2 weeks, and it can go to the police station, it can go to a federally licensed dealer. It doesn't necessarily have to go to the police station.
We should talk about that red flag law, because that has been progress. We'll do that when we come back. Stay with us. So it wasn't, I will tell you, there was a conversation that I had on the radio and then here on the television with the Attorney General-elect, Peter Nerona, about, can't we do something when we know someone is having some challenges and has access to weapons? And this was, I hate to refer to it, this is a handful of shootings ago. And the Police Chiefs Association, was very public about crediting the conversation that I had with the Attorney General in their efforts to build the red flag law legislation. The governor stepped in when she felt like the momentum was there and did an executive order, but good. I don't care how these things start. Tim White just did a little bit of an exercise on the red flag legislation. You want to take a look.
It's called an Extreme Risk Protection Order, or the Red Flag Law. A Target 12 review of court data found since it was signed into law in June 2018, the police have requested a red flag order 21 times. One community has used it more than others, Cumberland, with 5 petitions to the court in the last year. In 2018, the Cumberland Police Department got a call that an employee at a local business was a safety concern. Deputy Chief Doug Chulo says he remembers talking to the mayor about the issue.
And him and I are having a conversation, and he says, "Hey, have we done everything we can absolutely do?" And I realized, no, we haven't. We've got this law on the books.
So Chulo asked a judge to grant an extreme risk protection order to block the employee's access to weapons. Was it foreign territory?
Oh, it absolutely was. And
the judge signed an immediate 14-day order, then later a 1-year extension. By law, the orders require a search warrant of the person's home.
There were no firearms. It was a situation where it was preventing the purchase, but we didn't know that until we went out to the house.
Target 12 couldn't get into any red flag hearings at Superior Court because they're closed to the public, but here's how the law works. A judge makes the call if police have presented probable cause that a person is a danger to issue a 14-day order. Then police must present clear and convincing evidence at a different hearing for a judge to block access to guns for up to 1 year.
It's a secret proceeding to remove your constitutional rights.
Frank Sicoccio is the president of the Rhode Island Second Amendment Coalition. His issue is with that first emergency hearing where the person isn't notified.
And people could make accusations against you, and a judge makes a ruling on you without you there.
But only for a 2-week period of time. Then there's a full hearing in which you are notified, you come in, and you can make your case, right?
Correct. Good luck trying to get a judge who's already made a determination that you're dangerous to change his or her mind now that you're there, after the police have already said, yes, we think that person's a danger. Good luck with that.
In Cumberland, Chulo says they dropped 3 of their 5 cases before the full hearing.
We were satisfied that the person was not a risk to themselves or to the community.
Chulo says the relatively large number of red flag cases in Cumberland is not a reflection of the community or that the police department is aggressive.
It's like anything else. Once you do it and get comfortable with it, you understand what needs to be done.
Chulo says now that the law is a year old, some of the protective orders are expiring soon, and police departments are going to have to determine if they want to ask a judge to extend those orders again.
We only got a couple of minutes, but I understand the qualm that the gentleman has there, but truth be told, Cumberland Police withdrew their request and their need. There's some space and time for everyone to think about it.
Yeah.
General Assembly passed that law.
Right.
It's a good thing.
It is a good thing. It's an excellent thing. And I think you're right. I think it was because the police chiefs came to them and said that they felt like it was an important thing to do, and it was a tool that they could use. And it was also after Parkland.
Right. Okay. Only got a minute. What do you want to do now? I mean, what's your strategy? We're off session. I mean, I don't see any race back by the General Assembly over the summer, that's for sure. They might on IGT and Twin River, but that's not necessarily going to happen either.
Right.
So,
right.
What do you want to do?
Well, right now we're planning a vigil tomorrow night. There's a vigil in the Latino community down in Providence. It's going to be
Saturday?
Saturday. No, it's actually tonight.
Okay. Yeah, so it happened.
It's happened.
Yeah, we
oh
taped
dear.
this on Thursday.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
We're just going to keep fine-tuning what we're doing, and we're going to be talking to people in districts and making sure that they're letting their legislators know how they feel about this issue.
General Assembly has been very quiet underneath the Speaker, yes?
I haven't seen it. I really haven't seen much at all on
Rare
social
that a
media.
Democratic General Assembly would be so quiet on this issue.
Believe me, I'm a little frustrated by that. I think it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, it only adds into the folklore of Rhode Island politics that the equations and the brands, if you will, that you expect are true nationally are not necessarily true here, correct?
That's true, but on the other hand, we know that there's a majority of people that support it in both the House and the Senate. So it's,
We shall see.
we shall see what happens in January.
All right. Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
We'll keep up. I hope we don't have to have the conversation on a crisis basis, but we certainly have to keep the conversation going. Final word next. Coming up on the Monday program, we have the Twin River side of the challenge between Twin River and IGT. This past Monday, we had the chairman of IGT, Bob Vinson. If you missed that show, go to foxprovidence.com for his perspective. But Mark Christofouli, who's the president of Twin River, will be here on the Monday show. So make an appointment for that. Have a great summer weekend. Good night.